I have an intuitive response to working with wood. Initially I have to find the timber, so it's like hunting, you know, it's like going out into the woods and hunting. That immediately gives me a connection to the material that I'm working with. My name's Wycliffe Stutchbury, and my material of choice is timber. My work always centres around place, origin, provenance. Landscape is always at the back of my mind. An imagined landscape, usually, sometimes more specific, but always a bird's eye view. Each work is named after the place where I found the timber, and that also plays an important part, this sense of provenance and what the timber has experienced. And it also is helpful in reducing my palette to know that I'm restricted to the material from one place. And although there's an editing process, that's just what it is. It's an editing process, and I do see myself really as an editor. I worked as a furniture maker for 20 years. What's been lovely about returning to wood is that I've kind of drawn back on all those techniques, and although I kind of have them, this is almost an exercise in learning when to stop. And I sort of want to try and just allow timber to speak for itself. What I love about timber is its kind of lack of consistency in a way. It's full of surprises and the character, and that's why I enjoy having my timber in front of me and deciding what I'm going to do from it. So I'm led by the material because the characteristics are so varied. You know, some timbers hold an edge just beautifully, like holly, which is very close grained, just holds an edge beautifully. And then you have bog oak, which is, you know, 5,000 years old, and you cut into it and it smells of burnt rubber, and it has these huge deep fissures in it, and you really feel like you're revealing a hidden world. It's just wonderful to be able to respond to the character of the material. Although I love its unpredictability, it is also unreliable. It splits, it cracks, it warps. But I've tried to celebrate that in some of the pieces, like the spheres. I've imposed this geometric form on a lump of wood and then allowed it to do its thing, and tried to embrace the characteristics of it rather than try and suppress them. I mean, the wonderful thing is that it's not just about the material. I mean, it's almost two stories, because you have your finished timber, but you have these amazing trees and how they occupy the landscape, and how they've lived and how they've absorbed their environment. So you have hawthorns on the South Downs that have been tortured by the prevailing wind, and they're sort of, you know, they've swept away from the wind, and that's how they've responded, but they've dug their heels in. They're almost like they record history in the way that they respond to their environment. The West Dean piece, which is a 3D piece, it's a large bit of wood that I found when I was working at West Dean in West Sussex. And there I have responded in a kind of visceral, raw way to what I saw in the timber, and I've carved into it and I've hacked into it to bring out the qualities that I wanted to bring forward and wanted to bring into the spotlight. But I've tried to hold back as much as I can, tried not to intervene, and it was a very kind of coarse process for me. It's a constant challenge for me to try and do as little as possible, basically. The triptychs, Hill 10, 11 and 12, which are quite mannered, and I really have imposed a framework. They are essentially, I saw them as almost sketchbook ideas. They're 3 panels which are close-ups of details in a landscape. Well, that's how I imagine it. And there I have been very careful about where I've placed the pieces, and I've had a structure, and it's always a battle for me in those kind of pieces to try and work intuitively and not self-consciously. So it's a constant battle between wanting to control and trying to let go. That's the best moment, is when I let go and just let it take its own course. When I just relinquish myself of responsibility. Generally every piece, I have a kind of image in my mind of what it's going to look, what I would like it to look like, and it usually ends up looking nothing like that at all. Nothing like it. Provenance is central to the work that I do. The place where I find the timber for each work provides its title. So 100-foot drain is bog oak that is made from bog oak that was found in the Norfolk Fens. I've been there and I look at aerial views of it, and it imbues my subconscious when I'm making. I mean, 100-foot drain 7, which is another bog oak triptych, is a sort of imagined landscape which is sort of mixed somewhere between South Downs, where I grew up, and the Fens of East Anglia, where there are meanders and this kind of canal system. So yes, the provenance and the landscape are absolutely the central column. It validates what I do and the experiences that timber has had. So a fall line is an imaginary line between 2 rivers that run in parallel, and where they might fall from the Earth's crust, from the landscape. And I just liked that idea of a river running on the surface and then descending and dropping out, and it's sort of, and so it holds a course, and then it drops away, and that's sort of reminded me of how I work, where I have an idea and I have a path that I want to follow, and then I get distracted, or I kind of lose interest, or I lose my concentration, and it kind of falls away and meanders off into something else. But I also like the geographical suggestion of fall line, where it is something topographical. It's something about the physical landscape. And lines are very important in my work. This is called Gales Farm 5, and it's discarded field fencing. The timber was found at Gales Farm, which is near Friston, at the end of the South Downs, on the eastern side of the South Downs. It's a very bleak part of the South Downs, very close to the sea, where it's been buffeted by the wind and the rain for 40, 50 years. There are all these greys and these browns and these very dark, almost charcoal colours, and that's all been decided by where it was, whether it was underground or whether it was part of a latch for a gate, or whether it was facing the southwest and getting bleached and rained on. So it kind of sustains the scars, if you like, of its environment, but it produces these amazing colours and textures and the characteristics of it, and the open grain that can emerge. And so it was a lovely palette to work with, and I just sort of skinned all this field fencing. So I just cut the outside millimetre of all these posts and these rails, and underneath it is virgin oak. So after 40, 50 years, just the surface has been vulnerable to its environment. and then cut it up into tiles and reassembled it. I wouldn't know what to do if I didn't impose these restrictions that I have. So I've restricted my palette because I've decided that I'm only going to use material from one location. That also liberates me. I don't think I'd ever get started if I had a huge amount of choice. I really enjoy the limitations and restrictions that gives me, and in the technique and process as well. I enjoy working within parameters. Otherwise, I don't think I'd know where to start. Yeah. No reason. Maybe I'm just aware of not wanting to use the word wood too much. Timber, I think, suggests to me a rawer state, maybe. I think of timber as being almost the tree and possibly its first conversion. I think timber as being bigger and coarser. I'm not being playful or trying to trick the eye. I'm not trying to make them look like something else. I suppose I'm trying to draw people's attention to the fact that there are this amazing variety of qualities and colours to timber, which I think when you see them in other situations, you don't appreciate. Like the screen, if you saw the fencing in a field, you would just think, oh, it's weathered fencing. But when you bring it in, you appreciate the qualities in it. They do. I have found myself limiting myself in the timbers that I use because some timber the character of it is too distracting. And what I love about bog oak and holly is that they have all these shades, but they don't distract too much from an overall idea that I'm trying to get across. Holly, for me, is the closest thing to ivory. It's beautiful to work. It holds this fantastic line. It's very close-grained, and it also looks like bone. And for the 3D pieces I've made in holly, I have the human body in mind when I'm carving them, and I want to, because I think the human body again is closed in, is a landscape.